So today talking about a very important topic, and that is the ramifications of COVID-19 on student affairs in higher education. And so student affairs, for those that are listening but might not know what that is basically if you think about college and you subtract all the academic stuff. So take away the classes, the professors, all that type of stuff. The rest of all the things in college is what I would consider student affairs or student services. So anyway, this is something that I've been having discussions about and talking about way before the COVID-19 situation, but I think the pandemic has really sped up the process. And this is a process that has been coming for a while. You think about the historical context of student affairs and higher education in general, and this was due to come. The bubble was due to burst. And I think a lot of bubbles are bursting, so to speak, at this time. And so where does this all come from? This all comes from the idea financially that, well, two things. The idea that financially you've seen a lot of increased prices of college and a lot of increased budgets for certain areas in schools, colleges and universities, but you didn't ever see an increase of accountability. And so my previous episode, I talked a little bit about accountability, or a good amount about accountability, a lot about it on the K through 12 side. And basically, I've come from the K through 12 side initially in education. I worked in high schools, worked for one of the bigger districts in the world or in the country, and a very data driven district. But even outside of that district, other places that I've worked, the whole atmosphere of, secondary school is accountability, assessment, evaluation. The government has a lot of mandates. Come into higher education, you find out that historically the government just never really put their hands into college a lot. A lot of people, professors, a lot of people with PhDs, a lot of, administrators, they were looked at as the experts. And so when you think about the educational branch of the government and the people that consult and all that, these are people that they look to. They look at these people as the experts. And so obviously the government's like, well, we're not going to really control that. But when we're talking about younger students and what impressionable children should learn, they feel they get to control that and they have a lot more say. So anyway, you have a general idea of college that hasn't been really pushed by anybody to be accountable. And so you have the people that invest as far as your alumni. You have donors. You obviously have the students and the parents that pay to go there and all that. And so there always is going to be pressure. But up until recently, there was nothing compared to what there is in K through 12. And so there was no reason to justify a lot of things. A lot of things in higher education was built on this idea of, doing the right thing as far as education and creating access and all that. And education was just this noble pursuit of knowledge and all these great things, not only, mentally, but also emotionally and all that stuff. And so we got into student development. We got into being holistic and creating well-rounded individuals. We got into activism. We got into all these great things. But no one really looked at it as a product or a business. And I'm not here to say that it should be or shouldn't be, but at this point, that's what it's become. Because you get to a point where, okay, hey, all these people are coming to college. No one's going to stop, and I still don't think they will. We're going to keep raising prices, and people complain, but they keep coming. And so we're just going to keep raising prices. And what happens, like in any business, any economy, once the demand for the product starts to shift, then you start having issues. And so in this case, high school graduates have been declining as a country. College enrollment in lots of areas have been declining. And with the rapid implementation of technology, not only the ability to find out more information from other places that are free, but also with different ways to become successful, you start to see more and more students and families shy away from this idea of the black box. And so we talk about the black box. We talk about education as a mysterious tool that, hey, you go to college is better for you. Why? Well, not everybody can tell you why, but we just know if you go to college, it's better for you. Some people are very realistic and say it's just a piece of paper that's going to allow you more access to jobs, which is true. Some people are a little more altruistic and they say you're going to develop as a person and develop better skills. That can be true as well. But overall, as a society, we didn't know. It's just like go to college, come out better. And people didn't question it. And then as you got to this point with more technology, more info, social media, a lot of different avenues. I was on that side. I was a college and career coach. I counsel students, families. We talked about, choosing what to do after high school. And it has rapidly, from when I was in high school to now, changed. There's a lot. Before it was like questions of how do I get into college? Now it's a question of why should I go to college? And that's a legit question that I wouldn't say nobody, but generally people didn't ask before. Now they are asking it. And so what happened was you had to start competing like in anything else with marketing. You had to, colleges got to a point where we're trying to recruit the same students as other people. And so we got to make our stuff look different. So how did they choose to do that? Better facilities, newer, more innovative facilities, more resources, all these different things. They put money into the things that would attract the student, just like you think about in sports. They're recruiting players. And instead of it being about the sport, the relationship and all that stuff, it became more about, look at our new gym, look at our new field, look at our new uniforms. And that's what colleges got into, that recruitment mentality. And so you start building, even though you didn't have the money to build, or you start adding and you didn't have the money to add. And then you get to a point where you have a lot of debt. You sunk a lot of money into things that you were hoping were going to attract people to then pay itself off. And that's where we got to a point. And then we had issues with the economy in Illinois, specifically with the state. Once the state start, having this issue with the budget and the governor, you start seeing a lot of these schools that were on the edge start to fall off because they couldn't hold out. They couldn't miss that money. Every dollar counted because they were so built up in terms of debt and adding things that they couldn't afford to lose anything. And that was the first wake up call. And so now you're seeing that on a bigger scale with the pandemic, but specifically for student affairs. This is what it all goes back to. It goes back to the missing accountability piece. Obviously, there's different ways that grants and budgets are justified and requested. So it's not just a free pot of money that everybody runs into and takes money from. Not saying that, but it's nothing compared to what K through 12 goes through. And so me coming in fresh-eyed from the K through 12 side, I'm looking at the programs that some people do. I hear people talking about the different rationales and different outcomes, and it just blows my mind now, and it blew my mind then to ask supervisors or leadership, okay, well, what are they turning in to justify that, or what are they turning in to keep them accountable? And there was just no answer. And trust me, I am somebody that I like to be data informed. Numbers should help the conversation. They shouldn't be the conversation. But I recognize the value of where I came from, where even though we were too much into the numbers and we lost nuance, we at least were always looking at something. And it's just more of the mindset of always evaluating and assessing. It's not so much of how you do it. It's the mindset of doing it. And so with many different institutions that I've talked with and people that I've worked with, it's just so foreign to them. It's just like, what are you talking about? Like, there's some satisfaction surveys, a lot of participation. Hey, we had this many students this time. Hey, we got a 1% increase or whatever it is. There's a lot of that, but I'm just like, but how do you know this is quality? How do you know it's adding anything? And people just look at me like I'm lost. Or if there's ways that you could do it in certain areas, I'm like, well, how come you aren't doing it? Or why don't you just get all the sophomores and, survey or evaluate or assess them? And they're just like, what are you talking about? And so it kind of threw me off at that point. But what you got to realize is on the academic side, it's not 100% a correlation, but it's very easy to measure. So if I can say, hey, professor, or hey, math department, whatever, how do you know you're doing a good job? Show me. It's like, okay, well, look at our graduation rate. Look at our, test pass rate. Look at our average GPA of our students in this major. Those are very easily quantifiable. You can get those numbers pretty easy. So I go to a school. How do I know your school's doing good? Well, we have an 80% graduation rate. Okay, wow, that's an easy, digestible number, and they know it. Now, does graduating equal you being educated? Does passing the test equal you being educated? Does your GPA show that you're educated? Not always. It's not 100%, but at least it's tracking something. And it's very easy for you to put in front of somebody. It's tangible. But when it comes to student affairs, and we talk about this, and I know it's hard. So let's say I have a conversation with a student. They consider me a mentor, and we met through this program. And so I have a conversation with this student once a month for a whole year. And you come to me and say, Terry, how can you prove that you impacted that student? It's very difficult for me to do that. Now imagine that I'm in charge of housing. And they come to me and you say, hey, this student spent 2 years living in the residence halls, in your residence hall. Prove to me that living here was a positive impact, or what did they learn from living here? And that's very hard for you to do when you're talking about social development and social, basically when you're talking about social development, you're talking about long-term results and results that aren't really always tangible. So how do I measure a student maturing, or how do I measure a student looking at a situation and approaching it a different way? How do I measure a student becoming more tolerant of other people's cultures? How do you measure that? Now, there's no 100% effective correlation way to do it. But there are ways to do it, but it's a lot longer term. Even if I could tell you 100% that, hey, your program is going to make this student a better thinker, it's no guarantee that that's going to happen tomorrow. It might be 5 years from now, after reflection and going through things, and they realize, like, man, that program I was in freshman year of college, that's what really put me on this path. But how do you justify that in the moment to people that are making decisions? So I get it's hard. That is the biggest thing. I don't think people are lazy. I don't think people don't want to talk about it. I think people don't really understand if there's a way to do it. So we have to acknowledge it's not the same. And we got to acknowledge that the hard numbers on the academic side don't always mean that people are doing their job. I can tell you for 100% fact, a class I got an A+ 100 in, and I didn't learn one thing in that class. Teacher made it impossible to fail. And so, hey, 100% of my students got A's. Does that mean you're doing your job? Not really. So it's tangible for academic, but it's not always correlated. It's hard to correlate social development, and it's very hard to have tangible results. And so that's one of the biggest pieces. However, despite it being difficult, it's much needed, because we are at a point, we were getting to a point where most places are going to be operated very corporate like. And so there's been conversations for years, decades probably, about business creeping into education. And it's definitely there. I think some schools on smaller levels or different values aren't deep into business as others, like a STEM school and places like that. But I think it's pretty much business practices have moved throughout all of education and the college side. But we still weren't at 100% corporate level, because again, you get there and you see a lot of people running programs that serve 2 students. You sunk $5,000 into a program, you served 2 students, you wrote whatever small little justification you need, and you got your budget back the next year to do the same thing. This time, maybe you got 3 students. And it's just like there's so much money being burnt and sunk into programs that aren't being utilized. They're being sunk into initiatives that aren't being really tracked with actual intentionality. And so you continue to repeat. Now, everybody's not getting bigger and bigger budgets. Some people get budget reductions and all that stuff when people are more accountable. But for the by and large part of student affairs, there has been a lot of same old. There has been a lot of grandfathered in. We've always done this program, so we have to keep doing it. We've always done this, or this is such a big, like whatever it might be. But no one's stopping to really question, okay, but is it working? Is it worth it? Or can we make it better? And so we got to the point now, like I said, less students coming in, which means less money coming in. Same debt going on. We got to pay the debt off. So we got to be more responsible with our money. So what tends to happen is that people start to now think with business efficiency. We need to look at very simple economics. What money are we putting in? What are we getting in return? Just like students and parents who are now consumers, they're no longer just walking up and saying, yeah, we're going to college. They're looking like, what's my return on investment? If I'm paying this much money for my student to go to school, what are we getting in return? And so with colleges and universities having to be much more of a marketing drive, there's going to be more efficiency. There's going to be more accountability. And so student affairs is just last. They're the last ones to come up to that level, because you don't have to recruit. Like, you deal with the students when they get there. I mean, you got to recruit on campus, but when you deal with the ones that are already there, you're not in charge of bringing them in. And so when we're talking about people in charge of bringing them in, of course, admissions, but then we're talking about a lot of alumni engagement. We're talking about a lot of academic on the part of professors becoming published and more well-known, or really doing work that draws people in. And so there's a lot more accountability on those sides. Student affairs is just kind of in the back seat. But the problem is we were getting to a point, and I was saying, look, 10 years from now, there's going to be no more just skating by. You're going to have to be able to justify whatever you do. And we need to start now getting into the mindset. We need to start now getting into the habits of assessing and evaluating, truly intentionally assessing and evaluating, not doing it just to do it, but really finding ways to show what we can do and show what we're adding to the school. And with Corona and COVID-19, all that, it's pushed that timeline up. It has absolutely pushed that timeline up, because now one of the first things that hit with the COVID-19 situation was education. And because of the actual physical limitations of the pandemic, you have now rendered useless a lot of the physical capital that you invested in to attract students, and you rendered useless a lot of the services that Student Affairs offers to students on campus. And so people are getting a taste. Not to say this is not going to be forever, but everybody is getting a taste of what it means to truly have a bare bones education. So this is a conversation I had with a person that I highly respect. And I always said this, and because it was like, why are Student Affairs people so scared to assess? I was like, if you were to give an a la carte education to every student that came in, you gave them a checklist and you told them, here's every service, here's how much it adds to your bill. Check which ones you want to use. I think every Student Affairs professional knows which services would not get utilized. I think we all know, and I'm not going to name them, but there's some that we know are just out of date, out of touch, or not effective. Maybe at certain populations, but whatever. And so I think everybody on campus knows where their office is. If you were to do that with every student, I think each office knows how they would rank. Now, sometimes, a lot of times, students don't know what they want. They don't know what they need. So obviously there's that part of it as well. I'm not saying we should do it a la carte, but I'm saying a lot of people are scared because they know that their services is not really what students are thinking about. And so having to assess on a high level, that would kind of bring that truth out. And I think there's more context to that as far as why students aren't utilizing it, or if they should utilize it, or ways to change it. But I also think there's also some that don't need to be there anymore. And so two things could be true at one. I think there absolutely are some that are obsolete. And then there are some that just need to improve, but we can't ever know because we don't look into it. And so it doesn't become a question of figuring out the facts. It becomes, oh, let's just ignore it. And then that way we don't have to deal with the answer. And that is why we're here now with this problem, because now you can't ignore it. At this point, those questions have to be answered. And so for me, my biggest push was, look, at whatever institution I'm at, whoever the leadership is, if you ask me, I say start assessing, start putting something together. And I don't care, because I get a lot of feedback. Oh, well, it's not vetted. Oh, well, it's not a national tool. It'll be skewed because we did it and whatever. And I'm like, look, at the best case scenario, you can gather some longitudinal data and say, here's what we've been growing in. Here's what we added to the student experience. And you can use that in admissions. You could use it for recruitment, whatever. That's the best case. At the worst case scenario, you can at least internally as a school say, here's what we're doing. So we know if we're getting better or if we're getting worse, and we know if we need to look into something or not. And so what do I mean by assessing? You could come up with whatever tool. Again, looking at the type of things that we're talking about is hard to get tangible right now. But my suggestion, one of my suggestions, was just a little bit of a longitudinal. It's just kind of like a pre and post test. I would do a freshman and a senior evaluation or survey, whatever you want to call it. I would do it freshman and senior year. And what I would do is just look at the gains, and it could be whatever areas you want to test and whatever. But I would look at the gains. And then that way it helps me understand as a leader where our satisfaction is, where our perception is, and all these different things. And so, again, some of the pushback, well, that's self-reported. It's not a correlation. Guess what? Most of the national tools are self-reported. That's what they are. I mean, again, we're talking about social development. That's what you have to do, unfortunately. And even to some extent, testing and quizzes are self-reported. But that's what it is. We can't measure the mind, so you got to rely on the student. And I think perception is very valuable as well. You know, we might not be able to say 100% this student is learning and doing this, but if the student feels like they are, that's reality for us. So if a student leaves here thinking the school added this benefit to them, that's reality, and how they're going to support us, how they're going to be a donor and alumni. If they leave thinking they didn't get something, that's reality for them. So perception, I think, is valuable. And then the other thing is the administration. This is what kills me with student affairs in higher education in general. So a lot of times the pushback is, well, we can't get all those numbers. We send out an email. Hopefully somebody does the survey. We go on the quad with an iPad. Hopefully they do the survey. We do this, we do that. Hopefully they do the survey. And to me, it's just like, this is your school. What do you mean, hopefully they do it? This is your school. And this is where the disconnect comes in a major way from K through 12 in higher ed. Because in K through 12, yes, I get it. The physical space, much smaller. But you would never see a principal or anybody in leadership. The government says, hey, we want to test, or anything. We want to test this. Oh, well, hopefully we can get them to take this assessment. Well, hopefully we can find a way to sit some people down and do that. No, I give you a real solid example. So again, I was a college and career coach. We have a post-secondary exit survey for seniors created by the district. Every school has to do it, whatever the questions are on there. And so they give this to graduating seniors so then they can collect data and make decisions. Guess what the response rate they asked for of the exit survey? Was it 100 people? Or was it a 50%? Or was it at least 30% of the graduating class? No, it was 100%. And it didn't matter what school you went to. It didn't matter if you had 50 graduating seniors, 5 or 5,000. You had to have every single senior fill out that exit survey. And keep in mind, this is the post-secondary team. This is not a government mandated, hey, principals, you have to do this. This was just for our information to help us do things better. We would like to put together this exit survey. And by the way, everybody better do it. And so I don't have the power to stop class. I don't have the power to put everybody in a gym and do something. I don't have the power to call a half a day. I don't have the power to hold your diploma. I don't have any of that power. And yet we were responsible to get it done. So you mean to tell me that as a president or VP of student affairs, whatever, you are valuing the health of your institution and you're saying that going forward, we not only have to be better in justifying our academics, we got to be better in justifying our student affairs and social development. To that end, we're putting together 1 or 2 tools that are going to be our prime indicators of how we're doing. And you mean to tell me that you can't find a way to make it happen? That's absolutely ridiculous. Tell me why. I mean, people that worked in K through 12, they already know this, but tell me why on the college side, how come you couldn't say one day on the calendar, hey, freshmen, every freshman, comm class, comm 101, 110, English 101, whatever, every freshman English and communication class will be filling out this survey today, and then you get to go. You're done with class for that day. Tell me why you couldn't do that. Tell me why you couldn't say every senior capstone course or whatever it is filling out the survey today. Tell me why you couldn't do that. Tell me why you couldn't say we're manually distributing caps and gowns. And in order to get your cap and gown, you have to fill out this survey. It could be on your Blackboard or whatever the platform you have. It's on there as of this day, April 1. By the time cap and gowns come, you need to have it filled out. If you don't have it filled out, you can come fill it out in person and we'll give you your cap and gown. Why couldn't you do that? Even if you said, hey, and I think that's just a cool idea because you get a lot of people to volunteer. You see a lot of faces, see the students. It's fine. But even if you said, hey, that's too much manpower, we want to deliver it. It's easier. How come you couldn't hold that delivery until the survey is filled out? And you just put a checklist, just like you put a hold on the account for registration, just like you put a block for them to graduate or to get transcripts, put it on the account, fill out the survey, or do it in class, whatever one. How come you couldn't do that? And so with those 2 simple solutions, within 4 years, you would have years worth of data to see, or you have one large massive set of data to see from freshman year to graduating senior year. Where did you feel you were in these areas? Where do you feel that you are right now in these areas? Tell me the places out of these options where you felt you developed those skills, or what was most beneficial to you. Whatever it is you want to test, you could get that done. Tell me why that wouldn't be simple for any college to do. And then you name it a fancy name. And I'm not picking on any school. I'm just pulling out a random thing. Let's just say the Gophers. Yeah, I know that's Minnesota, but whatever. Let's just say the Gophers. And we call it the G score, the Gopher score. And so we can look at this tool. We set up the Gopher score based off what we're measuring. And then now I can say from student to student what it looks like as far as the increase. I can say from class to class what it looks like as an increase. I can say for different areas of student affairs what it looks like as an increase. And then guess what? If it all looks pretty and we like it, then we go to admissions with it. And so now I'm looking at schools. I'm looking at school A. They're telling me the same thing. You know, we have this many student organizations. We have this residence hall. We have this facility for working out. We have this many sports. We have this graduation rate, this retention rate, this tutoring services. Cool. Then I go to student B or the class B to school B with the Gophers. And they say, hey, we have this, we have that. Okay, cool. But we also put a lot of resource and energy into developing you as a whole student. So while we have retention rates and graduation rates on the academic side, we also have the social development side through our student affairs programs. And so we've tracked every year that participating in these different activities will help you develop these types of skills, or will add this type of thing. And we measure that with what we call the G score. Every freshman, every senior takes this assessment, and we measure how much you grow through your time here. And on average, we grow students at this percentage. And so, boom. Now, again, people are like, it's not a national tool. Only you do it. So what? Guess what? No other school is going to be able to say that right now. No other school is going to be able to sit there and articulate what they're doing on the social side, because they're so busy arguing that nobody else is doing it. And so whether people are skeptical or not, you stand out. And that is going to be the key. That was the key before. Now with COVID-19, that's the key tomorrow. And so people are going to have to start thinking in different ways. And so instead of just, how can we add more? How can we build more? How can we throw more money at it? Now we got to start thinking about how we can be more efficient, how we can add more quality instead of quantity. How can we start pushing all our departments to start proving or adding some type of feature of assessment where we can start looking into what we're actually producing. And then as we look at what we're producing, how do we communicate to potential families and students, this is what we're producing. And so that's just a small snippet, I guess. That was long, but I could go on for a while about it, but the times are changing. And right now, again, everybody is living life with bare bones education. They're looking at what it's like to strip away the student services, what it's like to strip away the fancy rock climbing wall, and how it feels to just actually have education. Now, some people might say that's a positive because people are going to miss these services and things. And I think that's true. But a lot of people are now starting to ask, what's essential? What is essential for me to pay for? What is essential for me to get a good education? Because if you're telling me your online classes are going to be just as good and the education is just as good, then why do I need to pay for all the extra frills? And that is what a lot of people have been pushing towards. And COVID-19 has now brought that situation to the front door. And so that's where I'll leave it at that. I think there's more to talk about, but I'll leave it there. So if you got questions, definitely go to the comment section, like to engage in this conversation, share it around to my SA professionals. I don't think it might seem scary, but I think this is a good thing. So hopefully people listen and we start having this conversation. Other than that, thank you for listening.